All right, so part two of this week's video and presentation is going to talk a little bit about the difference between distinguishing understanding from knowledge. And a lot of times it's very similar in appearance. And the biggest part of this is that deeper understanding. So, can students take content, make adjustments, synthesize it, add to it, make connections between prior knowledges, and then take that and add it and work with it in a new and novel setting like we talked about at the end of the last video. And so that's a lot different than if a student can memorize something or can take a simple understanding and apply it to a very similar situation. So understanding is big ideas and connections of concepts and facts, right? And the ability to demonstrate that. Whereas knowledge is the basic concept and facts. And so that's again where we think about if you can identify a vocabulary word, or if you can, um, you know, see the differences between, two things in a Venn diagram. That's understanding. Whereas this basic knowledge is something as simple as choosing out a vocabulary word, knowing a definition, knowing how to spell something. Understanding makes it transferable, as we talked about, to a new and novel setting. Whereas knowledge, it isn't transferred. It's this also rote memorization fits into this, and so a lot of times we think about students who can say their math facts, for example, but when they get a story problem, they don't know which numbers to pick out and how to add them together or which function to use. Understanding also requires internalization with reflection, inquiry, inferencing, synthesizing, analyzing, all of those higher level Bloom's sort of things. And knowledge is just learned, as I said, through memorization. And then understanding is most often assessed through a performance task, an essay, a reflection, deeper understanding, this reasoning, simulations, debates, those kind of things. Whereas knowledge is simply based through objectivity and testing. So multiple choice questions, fill in the blank, matching, those sort of things. And while no one is arguing that those knowledge-based assessments aren't needed, there is this kind of push towards higher and deeper thinking. And I think I mentioned last week a man named Dr. Jerry Valentine, who's created this thing called IPI, or Instructional Practices Inventory, and that's looking at levels of student engagement in the classroom. And some of you may be using that in your schools, and if not, you might want to take a look and just look at it for yourself. And it looks at things like, are students being highly engaged? Are they doing things that are higher and deeper skilled thinking, or are they just working through memorization or things on a multiple choice test? All right, so content versus meaning, this is also important to understand. And so this is what the reflection for this week, or the discussion post, is going to be about, is understanding the difference of content and meaning. So one of the challenges that we find with UBD is to convert content goals into meaning and transfer. So what are the goals of things you want students to do, and how do we transfer them? And a lot of times, as teachers, we tend to look at our goals or our learning objectives, and they say things like, students will be able to memorize 6 important founding fathers who signed the Declaration of Independence. And that's not an understanding. That's a knowledge-based thing. And instead of saying the students will be able to identify key factors that were similar in the decision to sign the Declaration of Independence by these 6 men, that would be one that gives us that higher, deeper showing of understanding of content and understanding of how things work in relation to each other. And that gives us this opportunity to make transference. So what it's asking you to do, and what I'm asking you to do on week 2, is to watch this YouTube video and answer the questions about UBD. And so, again, this video will give you some insight into how that works, what you need to be doing, that kind of thing. And so with that, it really starts to get you to think a little bit about what you should be doing in your classroom, and maybe challenges what you're doing in your classroom. And so what I want to kind of close with here is that I want you to really think about, no matter what level you're teaching at, or what level you're working with students at, or whether it's adult learners or it's preschoolers, at what point are you able to take and make things transferable? How do you design a unit that's going to challenge students, but also allow for differentiation, reteaching, MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support. How does that fit into this? And that's where the starting of that template and the starting to plan is really going to give you thought-provoking work. The idea is not meant to make this extremely difficult. It's meant to make you start to think and process things a little bit differently. And kind of in closing, I'll tell you a little bit of a story about peer coaching. So I peer coach 9 different teachers in Baxter, and one of my teachers she's in her 3rd year, and she teaches English language arts. And we were having a conversation about. She said, "I just don't know how to know what they know." And I said, "Well, how are you building your assessments? How are you doing that?" And her answer was, "Well, I teach these things that I think I should be teaching. And then after I teach them for about a week or so, I create a test based off of all the things that I was teaching." And traditionally, that's how it's been done. And so when you go to UBD, as with her, I challenged her to think about what are the standards you're tying your instruction to? What are the assessments you're creating? We talked about creating a pre-test and a post-test. And so we're now in the process of working through some co-teaching where she's pre-testing vocabulary and spelling words, giving instruction geared towards spelling rules, vocabulary rules, things like prefixes and suffixes, tied to specific ELA standards. And then she's post-testing. And the key is that we should see growth between the pre-test and the post-test. And if we don't, then those students need to be brought back in for a reteaching. They need to be brought back in for that multi-tiered systems time, and that sort of thing. Our superintendent right now is on a big kick that pre-test, post-test is the wave of the future. And if you look at UBD, pre-test, post-test is very important to that. And so, especially those of you that are in standards-based or standards-referenced grading schools, you know the importance of pre-test and post-test. And so the idea is, how do we take these standards and what we want to assess them on and create this entire learning structure? And it may be challenging. And that's what this is meant to do, is to make you think a little bit about, how can I do that in my classroom? I have these units that I love to teach, but right now I just teach them because they're fun. And we're all guilty of that. And so the idea is, how do we take those and find a standard or several standards that information can connect to and put that into play with assessment, with learning instruction. And that's what this unit template is meant to do, is to get you thinking about that. And so, like I said, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me via email. We will be having our Zoom time next week, and there's an announcement on the front of the class for that. And so that would be great things to ask questions about. And as you're working through and watching this video and writing your response to the discussion, some things might come up. And if you want to jot them down, and if you have questions and you want to send an email, that's great. Or possibly see you at the Zoom time. I'll post that Zoom link sometime this week. So hopefully everybody has a good week. This is all starting to make some sense. You're not having any problems with the reading. And if you are, please let me know.